You're listening to the Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe, a podcast of curated conversations with C-suite leaders and those who support organizational growth and development. Get ready for inspiring interviews, educational lessons, and thought-provoking discussions that will challenge you to execute something new and innovative that will drive results in your organization. And now, here's Dr. Tanya Lowe.
Hello, you're listening to episode 14 of the Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe. Using my results-driven philosophy of strategy, leadership, teams, and customer experiences, I help organizations develop their best kept secret, their human capital. May was Mental Health Awareness Month. June was National Employee Wellness Month. National Employee Wellness Month provides an opportunity for employers and organizations to enhance existing wellness programs and encourage their employees to adopt proactive strategies for improved physical, mental, and emotional well-being in the workplace. Why are we talking about this? The pandemic has wreaked havoc on America's employees, and it's having an effect on your bottom line. Many employees are stressed out, burned out, and basically thinking about walking out of their jobs. In a TELUS International study of 1,000 employees, findings reveal that 80% would consider quitting their current position for a job that focused more on employees' mental health. Our guest today is Dr. Donna L. Hamilton, MD. Physician, trauma-informed well-being strategist, media figure, and four-time best-selling author, Dr. Donna L. Hamilton is among the country's most innovative health and well-being leaders. A trailblazer and a thought leader, Dr. Hamilton put away her white coat and stethoscope as a board-certified pediatrician and now supports organizations striving to create positive, productive, healthy workplaces where people enjoy working. Dr. Donna, welcome to RDO.
Hi, Dr. Tanya. Thank you for having me. So excited.
I'm so excited too. I'm so excited you can join us for this really important discussion. So let's jump right in. I love quotes, and I believe that leaders should live a quote, not just quote it. And the quote that I chose for today says, if you listen to your body when it whispers, you won't have to hear it scream. Dr. Donna, do you have a favorite quote or philosophy on wellness or employee well-being? And how do you live that quote or philosophy out in your organization and the organizations you serve?
First of all, that's a delicious quote. So I love it. Oh, favorite. I have so many.
I know it's hard to find one, right?
It really, really is. I'm going to right now say something that I say a lot. So I guess it's quoting myself. Becoming healthy. Well, there's a few. One is there's more to health than food and fitness. A lot more. So that is, I think that will segue into what we're talking about because a lot of people, when they think about health, wellness, well-being, they immediately think food or fitness or food and fitness. And they don't think about all the other arenas and aspects of being healthy. And that's the same for organizations.
Absolutely. I love that. Health is more than just food and fitness. So in my opening statement, I shared some stats on why I believe this topic is important given the current climate that we're in. Why do you believe we should be talking about this corporate wellness, employee well-being, and what do you hope leaders take away from our conversation today?
So many things. First, the quote you gave is, hope everyone is paying attention to that. The 80% are thinking about it. Here's the piece that's even more important and more pressing. Pre-pandemic, at least over 50% left their jobs because of a manager or a boss. And so that's a proxy for well-being. I mean, I know if you have any people who are big scientists, I understand it's not an exact translation, but in general, if people leave their jobs because of their boss, Again, knowing that health is more than food and fitness, that's a proxy if they left because it wasn't a healthy workplace. And since we're going to be talking about it a lot, it'll be important. So I'm a big fan of let's mean the same things when we use the same words.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are talking about health, wellness, and well-being, I use the words interchangeably because at the core, they do mean the same thing. The word health at its root literally means whole, WHOLE. So when the word was first created, we knew that we were talking about functioning at your best in every aspect. And then it's somewhere along the line, we started to use the word health to mean not sick, as opposed to functioning at your best. So then people started talking about wellness to capture that same concept, functioning in your best, mind, body, spirit, life. And then because, we tend to be very interesting with our English language, people started to use the word wellness to mean food and fitness. Yes. And still got away from that concept of functioning at your best. And so now we're talking more about well-being to capture that entire concept. And I'm really hopeful that we stick with well-being and don't try to hold that into something else. So for the purpose of this talk, understand that when we say health, wellness, well-being, we really are talking about functioning at your best in every aspect. And we talk about 5 arenas, so physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual. And we can get into that later. But the shorthand that a lot of people find easier to remember is mind, body, spirit, and life. Function, that's health, that's wellness, that's well-being.
Oh, I love that. I love that. When people are not whole, WHOLE, it affects an organization's bottom line. It affects productivity. It affects their ability to lead and manage their teams. And we're seeing a lot of that. And we're just the breakdown of the human person because they're not feeling whole or feeling connected. We know that the most successful companies know that employee well-being is not a nice to have. It's a foundational layer of higher performing workplaces everywhere. And it's a key factor in a long list of business outcomes: healthcare costs, productivity, retention, absenteeism, company culture. What is one thing you would suggest leaders do to make employee corporate wellness a priority? Where should they even begin?
They really have to begin with themselves. And that's not cliche. The research shows us that when the upper leaders, the C-suite, the people who are seen as leaders, because we know that you don't have to be the person at the head of the table to be a leader, but the more traditionally identified leaders, when they are supportive of well-being initiatives, when they are modeling the behaviors that we want our employees to have and all our stakeholders to have, that there's better buy-in, there's more engagement. And so that's really where we must begin, like truly making it part of the culture, not something that you do to employees, because that's a big thing. People want to do employee well-being to them.
Right.
Or kind of, try to find a sweeter carrot or a bigger stick, as opposed to truly making it part of the culture. So I would say those are the top 2, and they're related. Making sure that not only the CEOs, but all of the leaders truly are connected and engaged in it. It's not just something that they talk about, but they embody. And then also that, therefore, make it part of the culture within the organization.
I love that you said that. And I was looking for an article that Sasan Goodarzi wrote. And Sasan Goodarzi is the CEO of Intuit. And he's also a board member for Atlassian. But he talked about it is the employer's responsibility to make sure that their employees are healthy mind, body, spirit, are actually incorporating these things that we're talking about, and that they should actually model what does it look like? I think in so many organizations, if I see my director or my manager working 14 hours a day. Maybe there's something not written that says you have to do that, but in many organizations, people see that as it's a part of the culture. I love what John Maxwell says, and I quote this all the time: people do what they see instead of what you say. And so we have to show them something different. And especially now, we have to show them that it's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to nurture yourself. So not so that you're just effective for your company, but for yourself and your family.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so many different ways we can talk about what it looks like. I want to start even further upstream than most people think. So if they're thinking about it, and a lot, like you said earlier, a lot of organizations who are leading edge, and maybe not even leading edge at this point, they understand the importance of it, or they understand what they believe is the importance of it, which is an important distinction. But one of the ways to truly make this part of the culture is to start at truly buying in and not holding employee well-being programs to a different standard. So one of the things that we hear a lot is that if a company has a wellness or well-being program, whether it's a big company, small company, big program, small program, sometimes they are underfunded. Quite often they are underfunded.
Yes.
Or people have to, I'll just be candid, they essentially have to beg and continue to validate their. And I understand, we are in business to make money. Here's something that we don't often hear though. If someone says we need to get desks and chairs, no one says, well, what's the ROI on a desk? No one asks that.
No.
They might say, maybe what's in our budget for a desk and chair, but really no one's going to say you don't need one. They understand that it is a tool for people to be able to effectively and efficiently do their job. And most people aren't even going to say, well, okay, if you really must, but here's a card table and a milk crate. They're not going to do that.
No.
But we do quite often, see people do the equivalent of that with their employee wellness and well-being programs quite frequently, and that's fine. And I'm saying this tongue in cheek, but I am being a little serious. If you have the equivalent of a card table and a milk crate, and you really expect your people to be okay with that, that's your choice. Understand, however, that your employees and even other stakeholders who are watching your company, they know it's a milk crate and it's a card table, and they're making their choices based on that. And this is very, very important as we have Gen Z entering the workforce.
Yes.
They're not going to tolerate that. They're not. So if you are having a turnover issue, or you are having trouble recruiting top talent, that can come to a lot of different reasons, that often is an indicator. Because again, I'm a physician, so I look through my diagnostic lens. That would be, I would look to see what your employee wellness and well-being programs and culture are.
Oh my God, you're so spot on with that, Dr. Donna. I used to say the workplace is changing. The workplace has changed, and the focus was on millennials. Millennials are 40 now. It's Gen Zers, who have the same mindset a little bit of the millennials, but it's like, hey, what's in it for me? How is this going to benefit me? Where do I fit in? And if they don't see it, they're not staying. And so I guess the question should be asked is, what can I do to keep you here? Because the recent stats are saying people are rage quitting. I'm not sure if you've heard that term. They're rage quitting. They're leaving their organizations. They're thinking about leaving their organizations, and they're just not happy. So allow me to play devil's advocate for a moment. I'm a CEO. And I say, it's not my responsibility. It's they've got healthcare benefits. We've got EAP. Why should we take this on? What do you tell that CEO?
I would, again, start with okay, so if you think your employees can work effectively sitting on milk crates or on the floor, and they may or may not have laptops and any other equipment to get their job done, then that's fine, because that's essentially what they are saying. And that goes back to what we were saying in the beginning about let's understand what it means to be healthy.
Yeah.
Let's go a little bit deeper into that. Again, my background is a pediatrician, good old-fashioned primary care lens and perspective.
Yeah.
And because we work with kids, we're trained to look at the whole person. And we've done that before it became in. Now adult medicine and other folks are talking about it. But in pediatrics for decades, that is our lens. And it's the same for adults in the workplace. It's also the same for workplaces. That could be a whole nother conversation, because what I'm getting ready to describe not only applies to healthy humans, they apply to organizations. So functioning at your best physically, that's what it might sound like in your body, what you put in and on your body. So thinking about why should you care? Well, if someone is physically not capable of doing something, then not only is it expensive, but they literally can't do the job that they were hired to do. Mentally, that's kind of your thoughts, your beliefs, your mindset. I know within the workspace, the people tend to focus on that a lot. So some people understand the importance of if someone is kind of, they're kind of not functioning at their best as far as thoughts, beliefs, feeling disempowered, emotionally. Now, those are feelings. So talk about rage quitting. If you have employees that everyone is angry or sad or afraid, I mean, the research shows folks are not going to work. And also, one of the biggest predictors of how well a team works well together is psychological safety. It's not their talents, it's not their abilities, it's psychological safety. So that's another reason why it's important to care. And we have we do a lot with trauma-informed leadership. So, and that's another conversation we can have, but that's more important now than ever when we literally had an entire world who for the most part has been traumatized because either they were concerned that they might be exposed to something fatal and die, or their loved ones were, or they were vicariously seeing it. So those are just three of the arenas. There's a social arena, there's a spiritual arena, which is not about religion. It's about but though religion falls into that, but the spiritual arena is what drives your purpose, how you make sense of things. And the company equivalent would be mission. The personal spirit of an employee is important because lots of studies show that if you are aligned with, if you feel like your company's mission or your purpose or your job description is aligned with your personal purpose, you're more satisfied, you're more fulfilled, you are more productive. So these are all reasons why, even on a basic individual level as a leader, you don't intuitively care. This is why it is beneficial for you to care. All of these, because if you have your workforce that is functioning at their best in all these arenas, they will produce better.
And at the end of the day, that's what we want, right? We want people to be productive. We want our teams to collaborate better. I think you hit the nail on the head with, safety. Is this a safe place? And taking it a step further, a year and a half ago, people were not feeling emotionally safe in their companies because of what was going on in the world at the time. A lot of social justice issues, a lot of people speaking out about, I'm just tired. And so knowing that you work for an organization that cares about that, and they are providing resources that they're available for you, whether you utilize them or not, that they are available for you. Dr. Donna, what do you believe are the biggest leadership challenges leaders face today when it comes to implementing employee well-being programs? We've talked a lot about why it's important and why they should consider it, and why it's a must-have and not a nice-to-have. But what are some challenges from your experience that you've seen around, well, just leadership challenges with leaders? Where are they in their head about implementation of a model like this?
one of the biggest challenges is what we've been discussing, which is truly understanding what it means so that they can actually implement something effective. So it's important to understand that health risk assessment is not a well-being program. A lot of people will get and do their HRA, and then they'll find out who's at risk. And let me correct my tone, because I don't want to minimize that.
Okay.
But I want to understand what our intention is matters. Yes. So if you are offering HRAs to find out what someone's blood pressure is.
And tell us what HRAs are.
A health risk assessment. So a lot of people are doing those, especially some of the larger companies. They've been doing them for a while. And they will do them, have a third party vendor do it, and they'll find out, we have X number of people who are at risk for, their blood pressure is high, their cholesterol is high,
their BMI.
Yeah, all of that. Quite candidly, one of the biggest reasons many companies do that is to try to save money. And again, not minimizing that, but remember our analogy. People can recognize if it's a card table and a milk crate. They can also recognize why you're doing something. And so if a part of having a workspace where people want to be there and feel like they are cared about, and we're going to circle back around to that, because we're not talking about people need to be coddled. This is kind of on a basic human level. They want to feel like, and we have old research. If anyone even remembers from college psychology, they've done studies about productivity for employees increases, even if they think you are, even if you don't really care about them, but they think you care about them. So you improve the lighting, and they're like, oh, wow, they want us to see better. So when people feel like you care about them, they produce more. Right. People can sense whether you're asking them to do something simply because they're just a number and you're trying to save some money on them, or if you truly are investing in them. There is a difference and there's a distinction. So that's why it's important to do something. And quite frequently, often when people do assessments, it really is not about necessarily helping the employee be better. It's about impacting their bottom line. Or so remember, we talked about, let's not do employee wellness to them. Let's do it for them or with them. We want to make healthy choices the easier choice. And this is getting back to creating a well-being culture. I was recently certified as a workplace well-being culture coach. Because some people will do and it's wonderful that, back when we were all in the office, they'll make sure they had healthy snacks or they'd have a stretching challenge. And again, we love these things. Let's not mistake, however, having a stretching challenge as having a well-being program. It's not, and it's definitely not necessarily having a culture of wellness. It may be introducing that, but we want to talk about what our norms are within our organization. That's how we begin to truly not only implement well-being programs, but having a culture of well-being. Because you can have the best programs in the world, but if it's not part of your culture, people may not do it. So for example, you can have a bazillion literal programs, maybe breakouts. Again, whether it's virtual or in the office, you can have yoga programs and smoking cessation and knitting clubs. You can have a lot of these, but if it's not part of the culture to do it, because I'm making it up, but this isn't a stretch, people think you're slacking.
The perception. Yes.
And sometimes even if it's not, it may be a real perception, so if someone's talking about, we had a great time, with the company, remember company softball teams,
Yes.
This is how the subtle judgment and the subtle culture shows up. Oh, that's great. Our department doesn't have time for that because we are always slammed. That's a culture piece. Yes. And immediately it says, there's a lot in that statement, but we can all understand that. So, but if we make it the norm that people participate in programs, that the leaders participate in them, we make it the norm that people don't eat they actually stop and they go get away from their desk to eat lunch somewhere outside or at a table, not while they're listening to a call or not while they're working. These are part of having a well-being culture. So it may not be a well-being program, but it's really important, just as important for your employee overall well-being.
Well-being program versus well-being culture.
Yes.
If you're listening to us today, you want to think well-being culture. And, I in a previous discussion I was having with someone, we were talking about, just kind of going back to people do what they see, and if it's not a safe place to really take care of myself. And so a lot of what we're seeing, I think, in this burnout are the same behaviors that people were doing in the office, working at their desk nonstop, not taking a break to have lunch. And they're doing that at home now. And so they're adding additional layers to it. I'm caregiver, I'm school teacher, and I'm trying to lead a team. No wonder people are rage quitting.
Absolutely. And then on top of it, here's another important part too, because this gets back to those different arenas we were talking about. The social arena is very, very important. And different people call these arenas different things. This is the model we use within our company. So the social arena, that's the biggie. That's what gives flavor to your life. So those are your habits, your hobbies, your relationships, your money. That's kind of the core of who we are. And people don't leave who they are at home. Even when we're working virtually, they don't leave it on the other side of the screen. And so, as you mentioned earlier, a lot has been happening in the world before 2020, but 2020 put a lens on it all. So one of the examples I give is we can remember way back to 2017, right? I happen to be a University of Virginia graduate, so all things Charlottesville particularly close to me. But the whole country looked in horror, or the majority of us were in horror in 2017 when Nazis and white supremacists were in Charlottesville on that weekend, 8/11, 8/12. And then people went to work on Monday, and a lot of people didn't talk about it. They didn't, and so people didn't know what to do with that, but they were still supposed to produce and function well when people were really horrified. And we've had other similar examples of that. We can talk about January 6th. And by the way, these are some things that some people may feel uncomfortable or may want to say that they're not appropriate for work, but they are appropriate for work, because if you are a human in this world, you saw this happening, and then you're working with other humans who saw it. And again, going back to that psychological safety, which is not around, okay, we have to pamper people. I mean, it's more of a health term, but it's really about trust. Trust is a key element. And especially when we're looking at trauma-informed services and trauma-informed leadership, trust equates with psychological safety, equates with productivity. So if the unspokenness at a meeting is, I wonder where they were on August 11th to 12th. I wonder where they were on January 6th. That's real. That's very, very real. Other real world examples, as things start to open up, we heard, and I know you're in Atlanta. So when we heard about we've a lot heard about the increase in violence against Asian AAPI community. But, so in Atlanta, when there was that horrific mass shooting, and I want to just kind of acknowledge that we are talking a bit candidly. So for anyone where this may be a little bit triggery for them, please feel free to pause or take a deep breath, because we understand that different trauma words and different trauma experiences may be challenging for certain people. But if you then are someone who's a manager who, as we opened up, had to begin to ask people to travel, let's think. You asking, and again, we have to be very candid, because we are, people are people, and we have real lives.
Right.
If you're going to ask someone who happens to be a white male to travel to Atlanta, that's different than asking someone on your team who's an Asian woman to travel to Atlanta right after that shooting. And so it doesn't mean don't ask them, but it is being aware that you're having a bigger ask, or what could be perceived as a bigger ask. And so that could be creating a culture where we have these uncomfortable conversations and possibly make them comfortable. That can be a well-being initiative. That can be a new norm, where people have that conversation, because that's something that's very real. But if people don't have the words, they don't have the language, and no one's addressing it, then no one's going to create that as a program or a policy or a new culture change. And then those are the things where you might silently have people leave. Because it happens. I know another example. This is a podcast, so you maybe can't see me, but I am a Black woman, and I have a lot of my community is Black. So when we have our partners, for example, and this is, I'm thinking of a specific case.
Okay.
Where someone's husband was like asked to travel. Again, the company was opening up, and he was may have to travel to I won't name the state, but a state in the South that tends to be in the news a lot. But they have to travel, and his wife was like, "Well, let's have a conversation about that." Like, she didn't even know what that maybe would look like, or even if saying no was possible. It wasn't as simple as like, oh, hey, we're opening up, I'm going to go check in the call center. Because asking a Black man to travel to the South in the climate that we're having right now doesn't, even if he was feeling comfortable, his wife was concerned.
Right.
And so I just understand that these dynamics are going on. So even if people aren't bringing it up, it's still present in the workplace. And these are the nuances that add to that 80% that you mentioned in the beginning of people who would consider leaving for another job that had more was better for their emotional well-being.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. This is so juicy, Dr.
Yes.
Dr. It's just juicy. I want to, I got so many questions swirling around in my head. I love how you talked about having uncomfortable conversations is a part of employee well-being, right? I think for a lot of people, when we think about stress, when we think about Black women in the workplace or women of color in the workplace and some of the stressors that they hold, it's because of unconscious bias. And so being and not feeling safe to broach a conversation, but being able to have uncomfortable conversations. Uncomfortable conversations don't have to turn into race riots or, flip the apple cart over. It's let's talk about these things that are causing me personal distress because I'm feeling distressed at work and I'm taking that home and it's a problem.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big takeaways I hope people have as they're looking at is thinking about developing their skills and training their teams and their managers, because this is about leadership.
It
around
is.
being able to have appropriate conversations about uncomfortable topics, whatever that might be. Yes, we're talking a lot about unconscious bias in the workplace and different experiences that Black women may have, AAPI community, and anyone may have, because they're not all. There's more, a lot more topics that are uncomfortable than simply about race, religion, and politics.
Yes.
Though we have had an abundance of opportunities to address those in the past year or two, particularly in the United States.
Yes.
But even let's say more traditionally health related, mental health, stress, anxiety, depression, those are uncomfortable. Even some people may consider just general health, menopause. That is a health issue that affects a lot of women in the workplace. And some people don't talk about it. And so they are like literally not able to produce because they have to have a smile on their face while they're running something and having a hot flash and don't want to seem unprofessional. And they feel like they're carrying and projecting for all women. This is a health issue. And so we can begin to become comfortable and have the skills in broaching uncomfortable topics, no matter what that is. Because in general, if you are training your top leaders, they have some skills to address other, more in the past business appropriate uncomfortable. For example, I don't know if you're getting complaints if you're running a call center or or you're walking. Actually, it doesn't have to be a call center. It can be any business that is front facing with customers, and someone's getting a lot of complaints because they're rude. I would hope that you've trained, your leadership so that they can pull them aside and have the conversation. You may actually have some policies and procedures to work with them so that they're not treating the customers inappropriately. It's the same concept. In general, it's not necessarily comfortable to pull someone aside and say, you have a personality, you're rude and you don't know how to talk to people.
You're running our customers out of here.
You're running our customers, but people find a way to do it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So we, part of this, again, going back to how do we create employee well-being and cultures of wellness. So anything we're discussing, these could actually be well-being initiatives.
Absolutely.
If you know that you have managers who really don't have the skills and tools to support their employees and to deal with stress, because here's one thing we do know. A lot of companies and managers are identifying employee well-being as a priority. They know that people are stressed and they're anxious.
Yes.
So what does that mean? So yes, for some people, it may be having meditation programs. I love them. I can help you with that. Teaching more traditional skills. Then others, that it may be these more nuanced pieces to help people be able to produce so that they have a trustworthy workplace. And let's circle back to the Gen Zs for a minute, because we touched on that. I want to, because I know, again, within the workplace, another potentially uncomfortable conversation. People have opinions, but people might not say it. There's a lot of age attitudes.
Yes.
In all directions, young people judging older judging younger. Here are the pieces that are not necessarily around judgment. It's kind of looking at generational trends. I have a friend whose children are in their 30s. So she happens to be in her 60s and her parents happen to be in her 90s. And she said her parents, her 90-year-old parents, could not fathom not taking a job or leaving a job because it didn't make them happy and wasn't fulfilling. Her children cannot fathom staying at a job that does not make them happy and is not fulfilling.
Yes.
And so it's not unique. And I love that example because it's not unique to her family. The data shows that generationally. The younger millennials and the older Gen Zs, we have about 2 to 3 years of Gen Zs in the workplace now. 2020 threw off my perception of time along with a lot of the world.
Yes.
Because graduations were thrown off. But you get the idea. The younger millennials, older Gen Zs, the data shows us that what drives them, they're not motivated by the same thing that older generations were. And older generations quite candidly were motivated quite often by money. I mean, we can call it something different.
Stability. Perceived stability.
Yes, exactly. And not to say that the younger millennials and the older Gen Zs don't want that, but what drives them, that gets that spiritual arena I talked about. They're driven by purpose.
Yes.
They're driven by fulfillment. And we know, again, we look at the research around productivity and engagement because the health connects to everything. Yes. When people are doing something that makes them feel fulfilled and is aligned with their personal purpose, they are, say it with me if you're listening, they're more engaged more productive. So this is why these are all employee well-being topics and why it behooves you to care about them, invest in them with your money as well as your support, because both are important, coming from leaders, especially CEOs, and your habits and your behaviors to create new norms.
Absolutely, most definitely. Dr. Donna, Kaiser Permanente Business stated in a recent report, you have an opportunity, and they're talking to employers, you have an opportunity to improve the health of your employees every day. Making small changes to your workplace and company policies is a great way to start, and it's where you can make the biggest impact. Where would we've talked about, program versus culture, having difficult, uncomfortable conversations, trauma. We've talked about a lot. When we think about policy, right? Because policy drives everything. I can remember when I was in the workplace, there was always someone that says, that's not in the policy. That's not in the policy. Where would you suggest leaders begin when it comes to updating policies for implementing corporate wellness? We've talked about a lot, but where does that start? Does it start with the executive team? Does it start with HR? Does it start with, doing a needs assessment? What do the policies need to reflect in order for us to make this a thing?
Great question. And that's one of the things we do with our company, because one size doesn't fit all. By the way, that's another one of my favorite quotations. I'm quoting myself. One size doesn't fit all when it comes to health. It doesn't. And so one size doesn't fit all with where to start. Yeah. And so, and again, in a lot of companies, they know that if they have a big something to tackle, they'll have a strategic plan. They might have a retreat. So it's the same with this. We may need to sit down, and actually that's often where we start. You get your key players in the room. And again, this comes to the leadership, because often people might do this. So they'll have a wellness committee with wellbeing champions in it. And they are the people who are on fire for health and wellness. And then they have the HR people who may be on fire, excited about it, but they have to be there. They'll have someone from legal department who may or may not be there for wellness, but they have to be there.
Yes.
You understand, but this is important because that's your wellness committee. And that's where it starts. And if they have to then try to sell it upstream and convince people, then that is challenging, and that makes it tough to, even if a policy is written, then again, is it really going to be implemented, and will it become part of the culture? So we're advocates for starting very far upstream and then inviting people, because let's face it, no matter where you work, who isn't typically excited if the CEO personally invites them to be on, or appoints them to be on a committee, that the CEO or the COO or some other decision makers, they're there, they're at the table. They're like, oh, okay, this is real. This is what support looks like. This is what creating a new norm looks like. So before you write the policy, to make it something that people are very clear, oh, this is real. This is real buy-in. This isn't just something they're doing to check a box or because it's in right now. So these are some of the pieces I would say. This is where to start. Make sure you have people who will actually buy in, support, and promote the policy. And then after that, that's when we can sit and talk about what's needed in your organization. And there are lots of different ways to do that. With our company, again, it depends. We can do a strategy day. We can do desk assessments. It just depends on what they need. We can do a needs discovery and see where it makes sense to start, because some people may already have great policies. They just don't realize it, or they're not being implemented. And so you might not have to recreate the wheel. It may be like, oh, wow, we actually have that. And this is what that means, or this is what that would look like if we actually implemented it. Yeah. And other people, they don't really have any policies, or they have conflicting policies. And so it may be beneficial for them to do something a little more traditional as far as creating new policies.
Right. Oh, I love it. I love that. Dr. Donna, what are you reading that we should be reading?
Oh, okay. This is funny. And I know you will appreciate this. I'm not a big fan of should. I'm very big on language restructuring.
Yes. That's my thing. Yes.
For anyone who isn't big on language restructuring, and it's important, it's not about semantics and, the mindset work, which I know Dr. Tanya is big on too. When we should, and we're connecting this to our employee well-being, when we should, especially if it's coming from someone you report to, that carries a whole lot. It means do it. And it's laden with judgment. And if you don't, then you're wrong. So this is why, if you're listening, why it's important. It's not about semantics. So we encourage you, one thing you can change it to is say could. And if you just say to your employees, well, you could be doing this, that lands very differently than you should be. So again, this is we love to teach, because doctor means teach. So I have so many books on my pile.
What do you have?
The newest that I have that I've just starting with the new book by Brene Brown and Tarana Burke. Very excited about that.
What's it called?
Oh my goodness. I knew you were going to ask me that, and I don't want to mess up the title.
Well, let me know what the title is and I'll put it in the show notes. But
yes, thank you.
So without giving a spoiler alert, what is it about and why could we be reading it?
Yes, I know. I'm going to tell you the other one, and then I'll talk about them together because they work well together.
Okay.
The other one is the new book by Oprah and Dr. Bruce Berry, which is called What Happened to You. And that is a key. If anyone is familiar with trauma-informed care or trauma-aware, and there's a big spectrum, and we could have an entire show about what it means to be trauma-informed and trauma-informed leadership.
I think we should.
Yeah. Let's.
I think we should.
And and so one of the concepts is that the majority, actually, I'm going to start that over. It's not even a concept, it's a fact. What we know with certainty is that before the age of 18, based on studies in the United States, that about 2/3 of people have experienced at least one childhood trauma. And then when you get past the age of 18, when you add kind of regular life occurrences, everything from accidents and fires or being in the military or workforce injuries, that goes up. And then, getting sick, illness. So there are a lot of people who have experienced a true trauma. Mm-hmm. And so when we are aware and look at things through a trauma-informed lens, and there are lots of different principles, and we won't get too wonky on that, instead of looking at someone who may be behaving in a way that would be considered problematic or strange, instead of like, what's wrong with you? Mm-hmm. The better question is, what happened to you? Mm-hmm. And that creates a shift in perception. It creates a shift in approach.
Judgment. It removes the judgment.
It removes the judgment. It makes it easier to, for example, if this is an employee, let's use that same employee who's gotten so many complaints from customers. Instead of like, what's wrong with you? It's like, what happened to you? It may be something recent. Mm-hmm. It may be something old. And this is why I can feel it from the listeners. This is why it's important, and it's your responsibility as a leader to care. Because these things show up very, very subtly. Here's a real world example. I know an HR leader who had been in meetings, a higher up HR leader. So she was quite frequently in meetings with C-suite. So there was a meeting, this was, early December. And the COO was essentially very much off her game. Can imagine what that looked like. Mm-hmm. So much so that after the meeting, the HR leader kind of pulled her aside and she's like, what's going on? And the woman said, so remember, this is early December. Mm-hmm. What happens late November? Thanksgiving. Yes. Long story short, she had been home and she disclosed to this HR person that she had been molested growing up by her stepfather, who her mother is still married to, and she had to spend her holidays with this person. And she had just gotten back. Mm-hmm. And again, connecting all the different things we've talked about.
Yes.
We don't leave ourselves at home. The best that we try, the best that we put on the suit of professionalism, we are human. We are human, and being human is not unprofessional. And so she was doing her best. And okay, so this is where having norms around having conversations and psychologically safe conversations and recognizing this is why it all becomes important. So all that is to say, the books with Tarana Burks, who people, if you're not familiar with her, she actually tongue-in-cheek calls herself the Me Too lady, because that's what her friends call her. She actually had an organization to support survivors of sexual violence before that Me Too was a hashtag. So she has an organization that supports survivors. And Brene Brown, I imagine many of your listeners know Brene Brown. So they did a book of anthology of people sharing their stories of leadership stories of overcoming different traumas. And Oprah's book with Dr. Bruce Berry also is talking about trauma, how it affects us, how it affects our physiology, and how to work better with people. So those are two that I'm just getting into, and they are juicy. But
I love it.
I get excited about when you're trauma-informed well-being strategist, you do geek out about stuff like that.
Well, Dr. Donna, and I will have you back so we can talk more about, trauma-informed leadership, having a behavioral health background. I think that's what separates me from many of my colleagues, because when I go into an organization, if I'm doing executive coaching, I can see that there's something else going on other than you're not productive, you're dropping the ball, and you're, being mean to your team members. There's something going on that you need to resolve. And it may mean that you just need to kind of talk about it. It may mean that you need to give yourself permission to utilize EAP or not utilize EAP and find your own therapist. It may just mean that you've not dealt with it, right? And so, as you talked about, there's so many things that we have encountered that are considered traumatic. And so I think that in leadership, being trauma informed, and how does that affect the workplace? How do people show up with their trauma, on their shoulder? I was looking at some data. 40 million people, I think 40 million adults in the US have an anxiety disorder. Some of that anxiety may be generational. Some of it may be tied to traumatic events, but nevertheless, they have an anxiety disorder that is causing them not to show up in their best self. And so, kind of going back to the beginning, if we have an employee well-being program that looks at my wholeness, not just my food and my weight and my BMI,
yeah, exactly,
then maybe I can thrive, because we spend more time in the workplace than we do with our family and friends. So
absolutely. And here's the other piece, and sidebar listeners, I know this may seem strange to you that the two of us are seemingly getting excited about this topic, but it's important. And two, the fact that we are talking about this in a comfortable way is us modeling what we're talking about. Because trauma, and I know Dr. Tanya can talk about this, it wasn't that we're old enough to remember only a few years ago where people, I personally know people who were traumatized by the word trauma, so much so that they didn't even want to use it. And that still may be happening now, but a little less so. And people are using it more. And we have to be careful, because not every upset is a trauma. What we are talking about are true traumas. So that's the one piece. But here's why it's important, because everything is connected. All those arenas that we talked about in the beginning, the physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual, they're all connected. So even if the focus of your employee well-being initiative is making sure everyone has a healthy BMI, and their cholesterol levels well, and they're walking exercise, even if that is the case, sometimes, and we see this a lot in our well-being coaching, if people are stuck doing what you would consider the traditional things around weight loss and eating healthy, oftentimes the best place to start is in another arena, which is often the mental arena, your thoughts, beliefs, mindset, or the emotional arena, or the social arena. Those three tend to be stuck points, and people don't recognize until we help them connect the dots. And sometimes it's obvious, as someone kind of saying, well, if you're stressed and worried about going home for the holidays because of, a family dysfunction, a lot of people tend to not sleep well, which throws your weight off, or they eat a lot more, or they don't eat, which also can affect your blood sugar. And they're like, oh yeah, that's true. And people get it. Yeah. And we can there's a lot of other ways on a very basic level how these are connected. So again, this is why this is all related. We can't reasonably put our employee wellness in a box off to the side and say, you can do it if you want, call EAP. And again, we love EAP, but I'm sure a lot of people are laughing because we've heard it, right? When you hear someone else say it, you're like, oh yeah, that does kind of happen. We put EAP programs off to the side. or, it's maybe whispered. Some people don't even know where to find it or how to call. Managers don't know how to refer.
Right.
Or if someone perhaps, so in the example we gave, fortunately, they had an HR person in there who probably was a lot like Dr. Tanya, who had a behavioral health background. They kind of knew what was going on. So they were able to have an appropriate conversation, and they probably did not, they probably were able to remain calm instead of giving a deer in the headlight, like, oh my goodness, what is she saying to me right now? Or shoving a pamphlet in her hand, which has its own level of communicating a whole lot. And so that's what we want. We want our leaders to be calm and confident because if it was a business crisis, most companies want to have leaders who can handle it no matter what, because last year, 2020, most people didn't see that coming. And the companies that thrived.
Leaders were in 2020.
Yes, you knew who they were. They knew how to, what was last year? One of the last words, keywords, pivot. They knew how to handle it. They know how to innovate. Yeah. They just knew how to take a breath and figure it out.
Dr. Donna, you're going to love this. Mm-hmm. I was meeting with one of my coaching clients in an organization, and she said she used to have a manager, whenever they had their performance review, at the end, she would ask her, are you okay? Is your family okay? And she reminded her, don't forget, if you're ever not okay, then, we have these services available. And I thought that was so, I thought it was kind. I thought it was really kind. Whereas someone would have thought, oh my God, that's so unprofessional. But I thought it was kind. And she said, I think they had maybe 15 or 20 people on their team, but their team had the strongest outputs in the organization because they had that manager who cared and reminded them, hey, are you okay? Is your family okay? And don't forget that we have these services in the event that you're not okay. And that was one of her takeaways that she used when she became in leadership. So I thought you would love that.
I do love it. That's fantastic. And you brought up a key point too. It's important for us to start to evaluate and possibly reevaluate what we consider professional. And again, some of it is I want to say simple, but it's not. But we'll say as simple as taking a step back, because the information is there. We already know that what are now called essential skills, we used to call them soft skills, but they're called essential because what? Because they're essential. Mm-hmm. They're essential to productivity and success in the workplace and true leadership skills. So compassion, kindness, emotional intelligence, these are professional. And so for people who maybe have I'll just say an antiquated concept of what professionalism is, that could be a way of starting to shift your well-being norms. So some of these things, again, may not seem traditionally related to employee well-being, but if you have a more toxic, dysfunctional workplace and you have a revolving door and you cannot keep your top talent or any talent or attract them, and then and some people know, a lot of people do know, yes. But some people they may not be as aware, but if that comes to your attention, you can offer as many meditation programs and yoga classes as exist. And that still will not change the culture that we all know that the data is showing people want to be in spaces that support their well-being. We also know that they're going to, like you said, this one team, they were top performers because that manager created a trustworthy space. And when we look, trustworthiness, safety, these are key. These are key as far as productivity. So it truly is all related. So some of you may have more work to do than you imagined, but it will pay off.
They just need to call us, Dr. Donna. They do. Call us, and we will set you straight.
Yes, we will. We will work it out. We will help you because it again, sometimes having the gift of a little bit of distance also is very helpful. It also helps you put your finger on, really get real information. And if you are open to making real change, it's helpful. I'll give you a real analogy. We had a client. Speaking of dysfunctional and toxic workplaces, we worked on a project where this was actually one of the most toxic, and I don't use that word lightly, but it was a very, very toxic workplace. And we were, in the team, there was a broader project going on, and we were brought in for one portion of that to work with one part of the workforce, and it was kind of the upper level workforce. People were literally, so when we were kind of meeting with them and, doing intake and doing kind of a culture assessment and figuring out what was going on, people were both relieved to be able to speak, but literally frightened.
Yes.
Like I tell you, people literally, and when I say literal, I'm emphasizing it because I'm not one of those people that use that's inappropriate. Imagine someone looking over both shoulders and whispering before they start speaking. And this is in a private room.
Dr. Donna, the workplace is plagued with fear.
Yes, it is. People are afraid. And again, we're not talking about people who are, let's be, it's okay if we're real candid, Dr. Tanya.
Absolutely.
Okay. We're not talking about people who are soft, who are weak, who are snowflakes. We're talking, and in this particular party, these were the top earners in this workplace. So imagine like your upper level leaders type of thing. So if they were literally that frightened for their job and their job security and their families, because even though they were bringing home big paychecks, they still had people to take care of. Imagine what your frontline hourly wage earners were feeling like. Imagine that. And there were lots of different, so we don't want that. I would imagine that most leaders who truly care about their companies and their stakeholders don't want that as their culture. But if you're too far removed, it may be tough to get really elicit that information, and having other people come in who can create a safe space or a relatively safe space within an unsafe space to get the information to get back to you. Because in this particular case, I will say, thankfully, it wasn't, nothing tragic happened, but I don't say this lightly. We were concerned, and we let the leadership know that we did not see any direct red flags, but it was a space that I would not have been shocked if I ended up seeing it on the news. Because there was that level of fear for their survival. When you're talking about people's livelihood and their ability to keep a roof over their head and food on the plates of their loved ones, you're getting to a very core level. So if you combine that with fear, anxiety, and true survival, we those of us who know better, we're not surprised if people end up acting up and showing out in a very dangerous way. And so again, I'm a physician first, even though I retired my white coat and stethoscope, that still forms the way I think and diagnose and the information. And so that's why it's helpful with a big issues like this. It can be very helpful to have someone who has the gift of distance. So call us.
Yes. Dr. Donna, we will definitely have to have you back. We have been chatting with Dr. Donna L. Hamilton, MD, CEO and Chief Wellness Officer of Manifest Excellence, as seen on ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, and many magazines. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Visit the show notes to see how to connect with Dr. Donna, grab a copy of her book, grab a copy of Results Driven Organizations, the 4 Keys for a High Performance Workplace, and our special gift to you for being a valued listener. Until next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe. Be sure to review the show notes for the resources mentioned, and don't forget to grab your free gift available at freegiftfromtanya.com. Until next time.